Having understood the meaning of ecological modernization, let us see that what are the core principles, what are the core ideas of ecological modernization. We just now discussed that ecological modernization unfolded in 3 phases, while in the initial phase there was a great reliance on technology. In the latter stage, emphasis was paid to understand the role of the state, emphasis also was laid to understand its alignment with concepts of sustainable development. But there are certain common ideas, or there are certain common assumptions of this ecological modernization theory. Ecological modernization theory moves beyond the apocalyptic orientation to see environmental problems as challenges for social, technical and economic reforms. In other words, ecological modernization theory doesn't consider environmental problems as unsolvable. Ecological modernization theory believes that environmental problems are challenges which can be solved. So, therefore, it is not an apocalyptic situation where the survival is at stake, where the survival is questioned. Rather, these are some problems which can be solved with both technological innovations as well as certain policy changes. Secondly, ecological modernization theory also emphasizes on transformations on core social institutions of modernity. In other words, ecological modernization, as I told, that it argues for a new modernity, it argues for a different kind of modernity, including changes in science and technology, changes in the production process and the consumption process, and it also talks about a new politics of governance, new politics of market. So, in that sense, ecological modernization theory talks about a kind of social transformations, talks about a social change where society becomes more ecologically aware, society becomes more ecologically sensitive, or in other words, which it defines or which is termed as ecological switchover or ecological makeover of the society. Thirdly, ecological modernization theory positions itself in the academia, which is different from the counterproductivity or deindustrialization argument as well as the postmodernist or social constructionist argument. Ecological modernization theory is positioned as a theoretical debate or as a theoretical perspective. Ecological modernization positions itself both distinct from the deindustrialization argument, which argues that it is the industrialization process, modernization process which leads to environmental degradation. So, therefore, the solution lies in deindustrialization. So, the solution lies in demodernization. In contrast to that, ecological modernization theory argues for super industrialization. Ecological modernization theory argues for more industrialization, for sophisticated industrialization. Similarly, ecological modernization theory also is different from the neo-Marxist argument of environmental degradation. Unlike the neo-Marxist argument, ecological modernization theory places less emphasis on social movements, rather puts more emphasis on the market-based environmentalism or the market-based environmental reforms. So, ecological modernization theory has a great belief in economic agents or the entrepreneurs, and it believes that the market will also bring environmental reforms, or the process of capitalism will be converted into one green capitalism or ecological sensitive capitalism. So, in that sense, ecological modernization theory positions itself, or as an academic discipline or as an academic debate, ecological modernization positions itself, which is distinct from that of the demodernization, deindustrialization perspective, and it is also different from that of the neo-Marxist perspective, which is very much critical about the process of capitalism. So, ecological modernization rather adheres capitalism, it embraces capitalism, but it talks about capitalism in a new form, it talks about industrialization in a new form. And the core idea of ecological modernization theory is to analyze how contemporary industrial societies deal with environmental crisis. So, the core idea is that what kind of transformations are required, what kind of structural societal transformations are required, so that the society can tackle these environmental problems, because it considers that the solution to these environmental problems lies in both technological advancements, technological developments, as well as reforms at the state policies, reforms at the central state institutions. And in that sense, it focuses on environmental reforms in social practices, institutional designs and policy discourses to safeguard society's sustenance base. Or the basic aim of ecological modernization is to achieve sustenance base for the society. The basic aim of ecological modernization is to achieve an eco-friendly society, is to achieve an ecologically sensitive society, but for that it does not argue for deindustrialization, it does not argue for demodernization, rather it argues for super industrialization, and in that sense it has a great reliance, as I told, on technology. And again, when ecological modernization talks about environmental reforms, or when ecological modernization is considered as a theory of ecological reforms, it focuses more on social and institutional transformations than on physical changes on the environment. So, the focus of this theory, the core or the central idea of this theory is certain transformation, certain changes in societal and institutional levels. It does not emphasize on the physical environment. So, what it emphasizes is the changes or the required changes at the societal and the structural level, and ecological modernization believes that reforms at the societal and the structural and institutional level will result in an absolute decline of natural resources used and the emissions produced. So, in other words, ecological modernization theory targets the institutions, ecological modernization theory targets the societal structure, and it talks about bringing out certain changes in the central institutions and certain changes in the structure of the society, rather than focusing on the physical environment, focusing on the physical environmental problem itself. We may identify 5 core themes or core ideas of ecological modernization theory. So, let us see that what are these core ideas, what are the core principles of ecological modernization theory. Number 1, ecological modernization theory talks about a changing role of science and technology, that science and technology assumes a new role in ecological modernization, or when society transforms into the process of ecological switchover, or when there is ecological makeover of the society, science and technology play a different role. So, now science and technology is not only evaluated or not only judged for their role in environmental crisis, but also valued for their actual and potential role in curing and preventing environmental crisis. Or in other words, now science and technology has got a new role. While in the modernization phase, while in the stage of construction of industrial society, science and technology was blamed because of its role in environmental degradation. In ecological switchover, science and technology will now be evaluated based on its new role in providing a solution to ecological degradation. Or in other words, now in ecological modernization or in the ecological modernization process, scientist has got a new role or technology has got a new role. So, now technology is not to be blamed because technology has created environmental pollution, has created environmental degradation, but technology has to be evaluated, technology has to be judged from the perspective of its role in solving, in providing a solution to environmental problems. So, while the traditional curative and the repair options are replaced by preventive and socio-technological approaches incorporating environmental considerations from the design stage of technological and organizational innovations. In other words, we now evaluate science and technology based on its role in incorporating environmental concerns right from the design itself. In other words, while now we were evolving a new technology or we are designing a new technology, we should be aware about its environmental consequences. So, therefore, ecological modernization talks about new innovations, it talks about new innovations in technology, where technology incorporates or technology integrates environmental concerns from the very beginning of the construction process, from the very beginning of the starting process. In other words, new technological innovations takes into account or incorporates environmental concerns from the design process rather than understanding its environmental consequences. So, in other words, when we are designing a technology, when we are designing certain kind of machines or certain kind of technologies, ecological modernization says that we should integrate or we should incorporate environmental concerns at the design stage. The second core characteristics of ecological modernization theory is the increasing importance of market dynamics and economic agents. Again, while in the industrial phase or in the industrial society, the economic agents or the entrepreneurs or the industrialists is again blamed for producing environmental degradation. In an ecological switchover or in the ecological modernization theory, there is a greater role for these economic agents or for the entrepreneurs or for capitalists to produce or to develop an eco-friendly capitalism or an ecological sensitive capitalism. So, now market is regarded as carriers of restructuring environmental reforms. So, while market in the previous framework or market in an industrial society was regarded as something which produces environmental degradation, in ecological modernization, market is now regarded as something which is a carrier or which is a supporter of environmental reforms. So, in that sense, market becomes an agent of ecological reforms along with the state and the civil society. So, in ecological modernization or when ecological modernization takes place, market is not regarded as something which produces environmental degradation. Market is not regarded something, or market is not blamed because of its role in environmental degradation, but market also is considered as an agent along with the state, the social movements and the civil society organizations, and market evaluated for its role in bringing out environmental reforms. And in this situation or in this stage of society, private sector becomes environmental friendly rather than enemy of environment. So, the private sector, the entrepreneurs or the capitalists, they become friends of environment rather than enemy of environment. In that sense, ecological modernization talks about switching over to green capitalism, where the capitalism process itself becomes environmentally sensitive and it incorporates environmental concerns from the design process itself rather than just degrading or polluting the nature. The third core characteristic of ecological modernization theory is the transformation of the role of the nation state. So, now we find that the state also has a new role to play in this stage of ecological modernization. When society transforms into the stage of ecological modernization, the state is supposed to play a new role, the state is supposed to play a different kind of role. Now, there is more emphasis on decentralized, flexible and consensual type of environmental governance with less top down national command and control environmental regulations. While in the industrial phase or while in the industrial society, state was considered as an agency which is supposed to command and control the nature, whereas in an ecological modernization stage or while an ecological transformation stage, the state is supposed to propagate, or the state is supposed to facilitate more decentralized forms of governance, where the state is supposed to establish, or the state is supposed to facilitate a bottom up approach to governance. So, instead of the top down command and control regime, the state is expected to be more decentralized, the state is expected to be more accommodative and the state is expected to be more inclusive, and therefore, more opportunities for the non-state actors to assume functions of the nation state. In an ecological switchover or in an environmental modernization, the state plays an equally important role as that of civil society or other forms of governance, and the state becomes an agent where it facilitates the process of governance with the help of other agents like the civil society, the social movement organizations, people's organizations, and these organizations or these non-state organizations are supposed to play more role in administrative, regulatory and managerial functions related to environment. For example, while designing certain environmental policies or while designing certain environmental problems, while designing certain environmental programs along with the state, these non-state agencies are now expected to play a greater role. The non-state agencies like the social movements, like the civil society organizations, like different environmental organizations and pressure groups, they are expected to play a great role in designing environmental policies, in designing environmental programs along with that of the state. And again, in this ecological switchover or in an ecological modernization state, the role of the state is kind of sandwiched. The role of the state is reduced or it is undermined by emergence of both sub-political arrangements as well as supranational arrangements. So, what I am trying to say that in this ecological modernization state, the state's role in environmental governance will be minimized, because now at the grassroots level there are different organizations which are expected to play an important role, like for example, NGOs, people's organizations, civil society organizations, social movements. They are also playing an important role in environmental governance, in designing environmental programs and policies, and at the same time there are certain supranational agencies which are beyond the state. They are also now incorporating different ideas into environmental governance. They are also now pressing the state to come out with a particular kind of environmental governance. In other words, or the role of the state will be minimized, because now we have different non-state agencies who will play an important role in environmental governance both at the grassroots level as well as at the supranational level. So, therefore, what I say that state is now a sandwich state. The state is sandwiched between the supranational organizations which are now imposing certain restriction on the state to come out with certain kind of environmental policies, as well as subnational or regional or grassroots level organizations which are also putting certain pressure on state to come out with certain kind of environmental policies. We can take this example like this, the Intergovernmental Organization for Climate Change. There are several supranational organizations which are beyond the state. They are putting certain pressure on the state to come out with environmental policies which will not produce global warming, which will take care of the climatic conditions, and at the same time the grassroots level organizations are also putting pressure on state to come out with environmental sound policies, to come out with environmental sensitive programs. So, in that sense, in this ecological switchover or in this ecological modernization, the role of the nation state will be transformed into a different kind of role. The fourth characteristics of ecological modernization theory is the modification in the position, role and ideology of social movements. it is not only that only the state will play a different role in an ecological modernization, or in the stage of ecological modernization, the social movement organizations or the non-state agencies also will play an important role. So, there will be an increasing role of social movements in public and private decision making process. So, once the society transforms into an ecological modernization stage, social movement organizations will play a different role. With regard to environmental policy making, social movement is no longer considered as an outsider, or in other words, when society transforms into an ecologically modern stage, social movement organizations are not considered outsiders, they have now become insiders, they have now become integral part of environmental policy making. So, what I am trying to argue is that while in the industrial modernity or industrial modernization stage, social movements were considered outside the state, they were considered as outsiders who are trying to always oppose the state or were trying to confront the state. In the stage of ecological modernization, or when the society achieves ecological modernization, these social movement organizations will now work hand in hand with the state. They will now collaborate with the state, they will now join hands with the state to come out with more environmental sensitive or eco sensitive policies. So, therefore, what I am trying to say that in this stage of ecological modernization or in this process of transformation to that of ecological switchover, social movement organizations will play a different role, where they will no more be outsiders staging slogans against the state or confronting the state, but rather they will be collaborating with the state. They will be joining hands with the state to come out with sound environmental policies. So, these social movement organizations in an ecological switchover stage will have a great role in coming out with environmental reforms or environmental policy making. So, there will be a shift from an anti-systemic demodernization to that of an reform ideology. So, in that sense, social movement organizations will play a new role, where they will join the state in bringing out with environmental policy making, like what we see today, that in the process of environmental policy making, or when the state is making certain policies for environmental governance, social movement organizations, NGOs, civil society organizations, now they collaborate with the state or they join hands with the state to come out with or to bring out more ecological sensitive policies. So, in other words, these social movement organizations are no more considered as outsiders of the state, who are only protesting against the state, who are only confronting the state. Rather, they are now joining hands with the state, they are now collaborating with the state to bring out more eco-friendly, eco-sensitive or eco-friendly environmental reforms. Finally, the last character, the fifth characteristics of ecological modernization is the changing discursive practices and new ideologies. So, this ecological modernization has resulted in bringing out new kind of ideologies. So, we find with this ecological switchover, two positions which are earlier considered as important, which are earlier considered as central, they are not considered now as legitimate, like the complete neglect of environment. While in the industrial stage, or while the industrial society, or in the industrial society, environment was completely neglected, there was no talk about nature, there was no talk about environmental degradation. That is something which is not found in this ecological modernization stage. Or in other words, when society will be transformed into the ecological modernization stage, there will be concerns about environmental problems, or environmental problems will become political problems, environmental problems will be raised to public agenda, they will be raised to the political agenda. Secondly, the fundamental belief that environmental protection and economic development are antithetic towards each other, that also is challenged by ecological modernization theory. Ecological modernization theory has basically challenged the counter positioning between economic development and environmental interest. So, ecological modernization theory says that achieving economic interest or achieving developmental modernization interest is quite possible, while at the same time taking care of nature. So, in other words, environment and industrialization, environment and economic growth are not considered as contrasting, as opposing principles, are opposing positions. It is quite possible to merge them together and to come out with a kind of modernization which is not necessarily environmentally degrading. So, ecological modernization basically tries to reject the idea that environmental protection cannot possible with rising industrialization or with rising economic growth. It basically puts forth the idea that with new kind of modernization, with new kind of ecological switchover, it is quite possible to continue the path of modernity and at the same time to take care of or to come out with policies which will protect the nature. In that sense, it results in emergence of new ideologies, which is like intergenerational solidarity in dealing with the sustenance base, or in other words, ecological modernization has resulted in emergence of new ideas, new ideologies, which talks about now environmental governance both by supranational organizations, both by intergovernmental organizations, as well as by grassroots level organizations. So, in other words, ecological modernization has resulted in emergence of new ideas or of new values. So, to summarize this section, to summarize these core principles of ecological modernization theory, we may say that when society transforms, or when society transforms into an ecologically modernization stage, we find that the state, the non-state, the civil society, they all play different kind of roles. The state no more plays the role of the command and control, rather the state supports decentralization initiative, the state becomes more accommodative, the state becomes more inclusive, and the state becomes more participatory. It facilitates bottom up approach, it facilitates people's participation, it facilitates non-states participation in environmental policy making. Similarly, the role of social movement also changes in this ecological transformation or in this ecological switchover. In ecological modernization, social movements are not considered as outsiders who just contradict the state, who just struggle against the state. Rather, social movement organizations also work hand in hand with the state to come out with more sensitive or eco-friendly environmental policies. And finally, ecological modernization also has resulted in coming out with new ideas and new ideologies. With ecological modernization, we no longer now consider environment and development as antithetic towards each other, as opposed towards each other. Ecological modernization pointed out that it is quite possible to achieve modernity, to achieve economic growth, while at the same time being considerate towards environmental problems. So, environmental problems can be solved, environmental problems can be tackled, while at the same time continuing with the process of growth. And in that sense, what it emphasizes two important things: one, certain new innovative technologies, and second, certain transformations or certain reforms at the institutional and the structural level.